Let's get out of here, I murmured, my voice low and deliberate. She didn't hesitate. Neither did her husband. Their drinks sat abandoned, the weight of the unspoken thick between us. Beside me, my husband shifted, his fingers brushing against mine, tense, expectant. Across from us, her hand lingered on her husband's leg, her touch just as revealing. 4 of us. One decision. Already made. Through the doors, past the bar, into the night. They do it, you know. I swirled my wine, watching my husband from across the bed. His grip tightened around his glass, but he didn't answer right away. What? I smiled, slow, knowing. The couple from the pool. His gaze lifted to mine, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. If we wanted to, I traced the rim of my glass with a fingertip. We could have them. His jaw tensed, unreadable. Setting his drink down too carefully, he exhaled. You're joking. Am I? A slow breath. His knee shifted slightly, tension creeping into his posture. You're really doing this? I stretched lazily against the pillows, my robe shifting just enough to catch the way his eyes flickered, before he caught himself. We came here to have fun, didn't we? His fingers curled slightly against his leg. And you think this is fun? I think it could be. I trailed my fingertips along his wrist, feeling the warmth of his skin, the steady rhythm beneath. And I think you do too. Still, he hesitated. I tilted my head, watching him. She was all over you today. That got him. A subtle shift in his breath. She was just being. He stopped, exhaled, shook his head. Friendly. I laughed softly. Sure. His throat worked as he swallowed, gaze flicking toward the balcony, toward the dark waves stretching beyond the open doors. And her husband? His voice was quieter now. I waited until he looked at me before answering. He noticed. A pause. Just long enough for it to sink in. And he liked it. His fingers twitched against the sheets. I leaned in, voice just above a whisper. Tell me the truth. My fingertips ghosted over his wrist, deliberate. If I said we could have them, would you want it? Silence. But I already knew. I leaned back, watching him. Picked up my glass. Took a slow sip, smirking over the rim. Good. I let the moment stretch between us, thick with anticipation. Because tomorrow night, we make our move. Tomorrow night came fast. We spotted them the moment we stepped inside. She sat at the bar, legs crossed, idly twisting the stem of her glass between her fingers. Her husband leaned in close, murmuring against her ear. But the second they saw us, the mood shifted. No hesitation. No surprise. Just understanding. I met her gaze. Let a small smile play on my lips as I stepped beside her. Didn't think we'd see you again. She turned slightly, watching me. Didn't you? A flick of amusement in her voice. A quiet challenge. Behind me, our husbands exchanged words, the kind that filled space but didn't matter. The real conversation was happening here. I let my shoulder brush hers, just enough to feel the heat of her skin. Enjoying yourselves? She tilted her head, considering. More now. Her lips curled at the edges as she toyed with her glass. But she wasn't focused on the drink. She was focused on me. I reached for a napkin, my fingers brushing hers as I picked it up. A slight pause. Just enough to know she felt it too. A breath from her husband. A subtle shift from mine. The space between us tightened. The moment locked into place. Let's get out of here, I murmured. She didn't ask where. She didn't ask why. She just set her glass down and stood. Her husband followed. Mine did too. Together, we walked out. The bungalow door clicked shut behind us. Lantern light cast a golden glow over the space, the ocean murmuring in the distance. The night air was thick with heat. We moved without discussion. My husband sank onto the couch beside me, fingers flexing once against his knee before going still. Across from us, the younger man draped an arm along the back of the seat, relaxed but watchful. She took her time lowering herself beside my husband, leaning in slightly, just enough for her bare knee to press against his leg. Not accidental. Not subtle. "You're quiet," she mused, tilting her head toward him. He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. "Just taking it all in." She smirked, setting her glass aside. "Good." Beside me, the young man moved. His hand drifted onto my thigh. Light. Expectant. I let him go. She noticed. Her focus drifted back to my husband, her fingers tracing the fabric of his sleeve, a slow, deliberate path down to his wrist. "You don't have to sit still," she teased. His jaw tensed. Beside me, I dragged my nails over the younger man's hand, my voice unhurried. "She's right." My husband's fingers flexed, caught between resistance and inevitability. She leaned in, her breath whispering against his cheek. "I think you like being tempted." His lips parted slightly, but no words came. Next to me, the young man shifted closer, his breath warm against my ear. "And you?" I hummed, tilting toward him, just enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Why don't you find out?" His grip on my thigh tightened. Across from us, my husband exhaled sharply as she settled beside him, leaning in, her touch lingering just a fraction longer than necessary. His hands lifted, not to stop her, but to acknowledge the moment. She let her fingertips glide down his chest, her voice light, playful. "You feel tense." I smirked, watching as his head tipped back against the couch, his breath uneven. Then, she kissed him. Slow, intentional. His hands rested on her waist, not pulling her away, just holding her there. A knowing smile touched her lips as she lowered herself, her mouth trailing a deliberate path downward. She took her time, teasing, controlling the pace. Her fingers moved in lazy, feather-light circles over his thighs, each touch designed to keep him right where she wanted. His breathing deepened, hands flexing against the cushions, his control hanging by a thread. A smirk played at her lips. "Relax," she murmured, her tone thick with amusement. Then she leaned in. His body tensed beneath her, muscles coiling with quiet anticipation. His fingers curled into the couch, knuckles flexing, restraint barely holding. A tremor rippled through him as she drew him into her rhythm, savoring every reaction, keeping him balanced on the edge. The space between them thinned, the energy stretching taut between each breath. His head fell back, a rough exhale slipping from his lips. His muscles shifted beneath the weight of her presence, his fingers twitching, caught between hesitation and surrender. A sharp inhale. A pause. Across from me, warmth spread through my skin, a slow magnetic pull unfurling at my spine. I knew this moment would come. I hadn't expected the way it would take hold of me. The air grew thick, heavy with something undeniable. A slow, lingering touch ghosted over my thigh, warmth sinking into my skin. My breath hitched. Awareness bloomed between us, sharp and growing. Before I could process, I was turned. A firm hand slid around my waist, he murmured, pressing me back into the heat of his chest, vibrating against my skin. His breath skimmed my neck. He didn't wait. Deep, controlled, laced with restraint. Fluid, but urgency simmered beneath it, his hold woven into the way his fingers lingered, exactly where he wanted. A silent message. My breath caught as his fingers traced the curve of my body, a slow, deliberate pull drawing me closer. Then he moved, not with force, but with intent. A slow inhale. Mine. His presence surrounded me, grounding me in the heat of it. My fingers curled into the couch, my body melting into his as the space between us tightened, humming with something unspoken. Each second sent a shiver through me, sensation cresting in waves. Warmth coiled deep in my chest, tethering me to the moment. Across from us, she let out a quiet, satisfied sound, her movements unhurried, her control absolute. My husband's grip flexed at his sides, his body shifting beneath her, his restraint visibly fraying. She watched him carefully, measuring every response, attuned to every sharp inhale. His breath faltered, voice rough with urgency, his fingers twitching as though he could barely hold himself together. She only smiled. Her fingertips skimmed his chest, trailing lower, keeping him exactly where she wanted. His head fell back, breath breaking apart, his body trembling under her touch. Behind me, I felt my own pulse quicken, heat spreading through me, the moment closing in. A sharp gasp. Fingers tightened around my waist, breath turning ragged, the space between us dissolving. Heat wound between us, an unspoken rhythm pulsing in the air. His grip anchored me, threading urgency into the moment. Something unseen coiled around us, tightening. Then, the tipping point. The pull deepened, pressing in from all sides. A tremor ran through him, his breath faltering, his body locking in the gravity of it, caught in the fire threading between us. Across from me, my husband's fingers clenched, his head tilting back as an unsteady sound slipped from his lips. His body surrendered to the tension stretched taut between us all. The air pulsed, charged. Electricity still crackled, vibrating in the aftermath. For a moment, there was nothing but breath, uneven, heavy, tangled between us, stretched thin over what had just unraveled. Then, silence. The ocean rolled in the distance, waves lapping against the shore in an easy rhythm. The night settled into stillness. 4 figures. Breathless in the quiet. Most people swear they'd never cross that line, until the moment is right in front of them. Be honest. If your partner suggested this, would you say yes without hesitation? Or is this a hard no for you? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, hit like and subscribe. Don't forget the bell. You won't want to miss what's next. See you in the next one.